Let's talk Bill's salary cap. Mike Ginnitti of Spotrac is up on the Wester hotline, chatting with him. Of course, the website Spotrac helps you understand the cap a little bit, and Mike's going to join us here for our at least yearly, sometimes, a couple times a yearly conversation on what the Bills do. Mike, good morning. Jeremy and Joe, thanks for taking time today.
Good morning, guys. My pleasure.
So, all right, let's talk salary cap for the Bills, Mike, and what the Bills can do, should do, how much room there is. Sometimes you see at the end of a season a team is in the red. They're on the wrong side of the salary cap, and it can be very, very bad. But not all numbers are created equal, right? Some teams have more flexibility than others. So, in terms of the league, where do the Bills look like they're at in terms of how much they could move around to create space? How tight will the offseason be?
Right, so they're definitely going to start in the red here, and about a quarter of the league is going to be in the red at least to get into this first couple weeks of February. But for the most part, these teams have figured this out. They're okay with sort of limping into this, understanding that there's conversions to be made, as you're alluding to here, and they'll be perfectly healthy by the time we get to March 11th. Every year is different. Buffalo was extremely aggressive, both adding and subtracting last offseason, as you know. This one, I wouldn't expect it to be that aggressive, but you do have some bigger decisions to make, which can certainly help from a cap perspective. And, you start with players like Dawson Knox and maybe a Deion Dawkins conversation, which could really open up some significant room. But look, you can get yourself to a point of positive 30 fairly quickly before you're getting to March 9th when you're talking to other free agents. So, you can swing about $40 million of cap right now, really without doing too much damage to the current financial roster.
$40 million, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And $40 million, of course, like for people that understand the cap as well, that doesn't mean you can only sign $40 million worth of AAV. That's right. Your cap hits come in for about 40 or less. So if you wanted to swing a trade for Maxx Crosby, you create the $40 million, you go sign him, his cap hit, or you go trade for him, his cap hit is 30, but then you can move that money also. Like how easy is a Crosby trade for any team out there right now based on his contract and how his number might look?
Really easy for the Raiders. I mean, they put that thing in a situation where they're basically taking no cap on to move him, so it's all about what they can add. You're looking at, though, about a $30 million cap hit to acquire him. Obviously, you can move that around once he's in the house, and maybe a new contract comes with that trade, but he's easily the top trade target, both from football and for business reasons, sitting out there right now.
Mike Ginnitti of Spotrac joining us on the Wester Hotline.
Do you like him as an idea for the Bills, football-wise and cap-wise, too?
Yeah, it's the right age. He's in that 29-ish age where you can probably get 3 really strong prime years out of him still. He seems pretty hungry for a lot of reasons. He's had some injury history, but I think it's the right time for that type of player. And this is a roster that you're probably losing 3 edge players right now and maybe a couple more or at least one more when you talk about the bubble situation. So it's a position of need. I'd put it top 2-3 position of need right now, and rather than go to the draft, which I think is going to be heavy on some other positions in terms of secondary and wide receiver, that's a pretty good way to fill that hole immediately right at the start of this league year.
Mike Ginnitti of Spotrac joining us on the Wester Hotline. The biggest restructure candidates for the Bills is Dawson Knox. I feel like he's the one where everything is available, whether it's cut or trade or restructure or pay cut. Let's talk about the pay cut idea, Mike, because that's something the Bills have also employed in the last couple of years. Matt Milano got this, and Knox could be someone that's maybe in the same boat.
Yeah, that makes sense. He's got some void years, so there's some cap kind of sitting there they want to work with. If you outright release him, you're going to have to take that on and then have to re-sign him or do something differently. So they have utilized the pay cut situation kind of nicely, converted some stuff to incentives and kind of hope for the best in that regard. I imagine those conversations are happening right now behind the scenes with a couple of players, but he's definitely the one. You're right. It could go any way in any direction, but something's got to give with a contract that's just too expensive right now for a player of his worth.
How about the conversations about market value for the 2 free agents, the 2 big free agents the Bills have on the offensive line? It's Connor McGovern and David Edwards. For age curves, for centers, for guards, how expensive do you expect those 2 deals to get?
Yeah, they're big numbers. I know this has kind of surprised some people, but that interior offensive line has just exploded in terms of both usage and obviously what it costs to keep them. So we've got David Edwards at about $20 million right now, which is about second tier for guards, and Connor McGovern's about $16 million, again, second tier for centers. And I think we're going to see the center market go over $20 million this year with Tyler Lindenbaum in Baltimore. So it's just a going rate to pay above average offensive linemen, which they've been for this team. And And that's what it looks like on the open market right now. So it's expensive. I don't expect both to be back, Jeremy, but I think you can probably make a decision on one of those at about that price.
Right, $20 million being second tier for a guard sounds wild. And that with Osiris Torrance needing an extension at some point too. If you were forecasting out kind of what the Bills will end up doing there, make more sense to wait for now because Torrance is more likely to get that extension at some point in the next year or maybe even this offseason?
Yeah, you're probably talking to him right now. He's about a $14 million guard in their system right now. So, again, you're bumping up a lot of numbers against each other here. I know Brandon Beane has typically liked to stagger things a little bit. So you're probably waiting on one of those decisions. And if that means you're bringing back, McGovern this year and then doing Torrance's deal next year, that probably works financially for Buffalo.
Is there any move out there, Mike Ginnitti of Spotrac talking salary cap, Bills cap with us? Is there any player or move that you think is maybe under the radar for what they could do, a trade candidate? People are trying to find ways that maybe there's a surprise move or a way to get a blue chipper, and you could trade a player that's under contract that maybe isn't a fit. Is there a kind of a dark horse candidate here?
Yeah, I kind of snuck his name in a little bit. I think there's going to be some chatter about Dawkins, which I know is crazy because you don't want to move a left tackle when you've got a quarterback of Josh Allen's worth. But I just think we're getting to that point in time where flipping that position over is probably at least in consideration. Dawkins is a little bit on the pricier side for the next couple of seasons, and probably we'll be talking about a new contract within the next 18 months. So that's a player you package with a pick and probably bring back either a nice bounty of picks with it or a player of a value you're looking for to fulfill one of his positional needs. So he's kind of the name I'm looking at right now. Other than that, you can get yourself into Keon Coleman conversations and maybe some other players down the road a little bit here. But he's kind of the standout. Could be a massive sort of wow in Buffalo in the next couple of weeks here.
But that would be about draft assets. If, in fact, they're making that move, there's not a lot money savings there. Is there a lot?
Yeah. No, there's not. You're only freeing up about $3 million there. So it's more about what you're not going to have to do in the future, right? So you're saving for 2027 in that regard.
For the receiver room, we know Curtis Samuel is about maybe as close to a lock as you can get to save $6 million. Josh Palmer, I was just looking at, is there any avenue where that would make sense? I mean, they probably want to see if he can get healthy, so I don't think it necessarily has to happen. But if they wanted to open up spaces in their room to try and turn that thing over, it's probably between Palmer and Coleman if they wanted to do it.
Yeah, and Palmer's got about a $5 million guarantee on his salary this season, so you're probably not going to just outright cut him. But can you find a trade partner? Can you retain some of that salary? I think I'm leaning towards you just keep him and hope he's healthy and becomes an integral WR3 in this roster. But you're right. If they want a roster spot when it comes down to camp situations, maybe he's a late summer move.
I'm looking right now, Mike. Like we've heard in the past how and seen that sometimes to create room, the extension that comes in for a guy and lowers their cap on the short term is an idea, but I don't know. Like I'm looking at the roster right now, and maybe there's a draft point buried in here from the last couple of years, and I don't know. Do you see anybody on this team that makes sense as like that extension now to free up a little bit of room for this season?
Yeah, there's one name, but they did draft heavily in that position group, right? It's Oliver, and I know we have kind of a bad taste with the injury stuff with him, but you can easily bump him out about 2 years at about $22 million a year and lower his $24 million cap hit pretty significantly for 2026. So that's one of those kind of win-win moves for both player and team at that point in time, as long as you're focused on keeping him for the next 3 seasons. I know they have drafted a couple of kids behind him recently.
Right, and different defensive scheme. I wonder if they'll want to do that, like what his role is within that. But the void years, we've seen a lot of teams push out money into the future. And are the Bills feeling a little bit of guys that will no longer be on the team this year still counting against their cap because of that?
Yeah, there's a half dozen or so, and if they don't extend any of those players, you're talking about upwards of $25 million of dead cap that's going to convert here. So Milano's over $10 million in that regard. Joey Bosa's at about $7 million. So those two alone, I think, are probably walking out the door here on March 11th in some facet, are going to leave some significant dead cap. It's just the going rate. It's just how teams are doing business in the league right now. The Browns have about $50 million allocated in that regard. So it's just sort of the way of the world.
Mike, as you do all this with all the teams and their caps, and you can see a team that's in a good space and a team that's in a bad space, and understanding that some teams are trying to win and some teams are trying to rebuild. Does the Bills cap look like a team that has been consistently trying to get over the line and pulling out all the stops to do so?
Yeah, it's a really great question. They definitely have been. And nothing says it more than the year when they, lost 4 captains and purged kind of the roster, and then immediately came back aggressively and built themselves into a playoff contender again. That's what you're hoping for, is that you've got an organization that can kind of flip the switch quickly, and they're going to see that happen a lot this year with new schemes left and right. So I do think they've been pushing the gas pedal down in every avenue, including at the trade deadlines. They really have put their best foot forward. It's just, some things stick and some things don't. But you certainly do see teams that don't do that across the league, and we'll have a few more this year.
And one thing we've kind of pointed out on this show a couple times, the way the Bills sign that might be different from other teams, they don't have like 4 guys near the top. It's Josh and then Dawkins, and you're talking $20 million AAVs. They're really kind of light on those. They're a team that backfills in the second tier or lower and middle class contracts in the NFL. Do you feel like that is, I don't know if we're in a spot to say right or wrong approach, but it is a little bit different from a lot of other teams.
I track, how this goes in the playoffs every single year. We just don't have the top paid players in the playoffs, deep into the playoffs, and certainly not in the Super Bowl. In fact, I threw something out last week. The only player who played in the Super Bowl this year who was the highest paid at his position was the punter, Michael Dixon. I'm not saying it's bad business to have the top paid players in football, but I think what you're alluding to is it's better to be deep than top, and I do think that's exactly how it works right now.
Yeah, better maybe. I don't know. I can't decide what's better, but I think you can kind of see in the way the Bills do their books that is something they believe will keep them sustaining is to have a lot of good players. While we might sit here and say you probably have to find another great one somewhere, whether that's the draft, a guy that's not paid much but is giving you value on the draft, because that's something that if you look at their last 5, 6, 7, 8 drafts, even if you have some nice players and players you like, there haven't been that many players wildly outperforming their rookie contracts for this team.
No, you're right. And I think, especially in the wide receiver position, that's something this team could certainly use as some sort of standout alpha. But if you're hitting on above average more than you're not, you're doing well in this league. And I think that's how most teams are looking at it right now.
What about around the league a little bit, Mike? New England going into the offseason, how much more in resources do they have, in your view, than what the Bills have?
Yeah, they certainly have more room. They don't have as many big decisions to make. They're sort of in a really nice spot where they did a ton of dirty work last year, and a lot of it worked out. They've got some questions, right? The Diggs stuff, the Christian Barmore stuff, some off-field stuff that may turn some roster over here. But, they're looking for an alpha wide receiver. They're looking for some offensive line to shore up, obviously. But they're in a pretty good spot in terms of how aggressive they're going to need to be this year to come back with the roster that certainly was successful this year.
Would they save money by cutting Diggs if they wanted to do that?
Well, they're going to have to wait till he's suspended so those guarantees fall off the books. But, eventually I think it'll work in their favor.
Okay, right.
All right.
And then lastly, also in the division, Tua and the Dolphins. That contract is massive. If they want to be done with it, can they dump him, or do they have to hold him for a year? What are their options if they want to kind of turn the page?
Yeah, I don't expect them to release him with the $100 million of dead cap. That would be ludicrous, but not crazy, I guess, in the current climate. I think what happens here is they retain some of that salary, and then they find a trade partner. So they're going to have to eat some of it to move on from him, get a late draft pick maybe in that process. But I don't expect him or Kyler Murray to be on the current roster when March 15th or so hits. So I think we're going to get to a point where we're going to see some explosive quarterback trades coming.
All right. Okay. That'll be exciting. Mike Ginnitti of Spotrac joining us on the Western Hotline. Mike, thanks very much.
My pleasure.
On the Bills and their cap situation.